Hey guys, this is Mel and welcome back. So sorry for the delay. Because of the delay, I hope everyone had a great holiday, a happy new year. I hope everyone was safe. And I really just want to talk about the Winchesters. That is the Supernatural prequel show. This video is going to talk about the 4 episodes that I've missed out on. So that's going to be episode 106, titled Art of Dying, which premiered November 22nd, 2022 on the CW. Episode 107, which is titled Reflections, which appeared 2 weeks later on December 6th, 2022. This one was also directed by Richard Speight Jr., aka Gabriel on Supernatural. So that's a fun break there. Then episode 108, which were premiered after the new year on January 24th, 2023 at its new time at 9 p.m. And this episode was called Hang On to Your Life. It also aired on Dean Winchester's birthday, so what a way to come back on. And then finally, last week's episode, which was episode 109, titled Cast Your Fate to the Wind, which premiered January 31st, 2023, again at 9 p.m. So we're now back on the Dune time slot, which I guess I'm more used to because Supernatural was always on more majority of the time at 9 o'clock. So I'm very excited to talk about the Winchesters. I didn't realize how much I had missed, and things are picking up. Also, just I am recording on February 5th. It's at 1 a.m. right now that I'm recording. Also, why I've been away is because holidays, kind of my voice going in and out due to work, and I can't freely record like I used to. So by the time I figured out when was best for me to record, I figured why not just pile all the episodes together, which is why we're here. So I don't really know how long this video is going to be. So I'm hoping it's not longer than an hour. So, huge spoiler if you haven't seen episodes 1 through 9, or even if you're not even caught up on the Winchesters, please go do so first before you come and watch my video. Also, a heads up, please be aware that I will talk about supernatural spoilers. Part of this is me drawing on any parallels or reminisce about things I remember from Supernatural. So if you haven't seen the first show before you see this prequel for it, just a heads up because there will be spoilers. So you've been warned. Also, my other video reminders are up on screen, so take a moment to remind yourselves of those, because it has been a while and I do apologize. But otherwise, yes, quick YouTube shout out to Golden Angel 15, who has commented on the last few Winchesters videos that I've posted. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you come back to see what this one is, and just thank you to everyone else who has viewed my videos over the last few months. Um, or who has also left a comment and I haven't seen a shout out from you, or you don't get a shout out in this video. I do appreciate it. It just might be the timing when I see the comment versus when I record. So just know that you're very appreciated. I'm still trying to figure out how frequent I'm going to do these videos, since the scheduling of videos is definitely a lot different than it used to be for me in the past. So I'm still thinking about that. But let's get started today. I think I'm going to talk about each of the episodes individually first, and then when I get to the most shocking, my favorites, the peeves, the random questions, I'm going to go then as a whole by the sections together. So first off, let's talk about episode 106. Timeline wise, this we get the there's not an actual date, but they did give some references to it. So they say that they've been hunting nonstop since New Orleans, which was back in episode 101. So nonstop for the previous 5 episodes. And then we've been told that John has been quote unquote off for weeks. I'm assuming it's referring to when he had to face against that god in the after he was targeting veterans, which was in episode 4. So this is 6. So off for weeks. If that is off of episode 4, that means there's been weeks between 4 to 6. So that's my take there. First scene of the episode takes place in Elk Falls, Kansas. We see Darla running through the woods to a barn where she is then killed. Looked like she was being pulled upward and then blood splattered down. But anyways, there's that. Storyline, though, was 3 different ones I picked up on. First one, A Creature of the Past. Second, Internal Struggles. And third, Where's the Tower? So the first storyline, briefly, we meet Tracy Geller, which ends up being a contact from Mary's past, enough that she would end up calling her Aunt Tracy, about Darla being killed. This leads to them believing that a Caribbean witch vampire was the creature that they were hunting down, but it ended up being a vengeful spirit that was possessing the dead body of this witch vampire called, let me get the name, called the Sukoyant. Yeah. So that was a whole thing there. Mary ends up learning a little bit more about what actually happened with Tracy's last hunt, because Tracy ended up being retired from hunting for the last 10 years, which kind of piqued Mary's interest. But anyways, there's that. Second story went line with internal struggles is John struggling with his anger issues that were reawakened during his fight with Mars Neto, the Roman deity, in episode 104. He's determined to finish the mission so that Mary can leave hunting and not be killed on a hunt, which is why he's pushing himself so hard, because he wants to give her that chance of a normal life. We also see Latika questioning whether she can cut it as a hunter, since she is more of a pacifist and not a warrior, which we do see come into play. Then we also see Mary continuing to think of a life after hunting, and if it's even possible, especially when she reunites with her old Aunt Tracy, who did retire from hunting for a brief amount of time. And then, of course, for Carlos, we find him being flustered over Latika's new friend named Anton, which I guess could be like her morgue friend who works on the occult, as well as, taxidermy, I believe? And just dead bodies. So there's that. Third storyline, where's the tower? So again, this is attached to the Akrita. So we see our hunters waiting for Carlos's contact to reach out to them about land deeds in the name of Rock and Roxy, in hopes of finding the Akrita's radio tower that they've gotten hints about. Now, the last scene of the episode shows Mary and Carlos telling John and Latika that they have a location on the Akrita's radio tower, just as Latika was showing John how to accept more peace into his life through meditation instead of going off of that aggressive anger. We are not sure. They show us a map, but we're not sure where the map leads specifically. It's just an X on a space. So unless you know how to read a map in a very quick screenshot, then you'll know the location. But they don't state it in the episode. So there's that. Death tally, as we know, we got Darla in the teaser. Off screen, the deaths of Rob, Mac, and the Sukayant were mentioned, but we don't actually. I mean, the Sukayant is already dead. It's a possessed body that turns ash afterwards. And then Mac ended up being a vengeful spirit, but they don't actually exorcise him, so he kind of just leaves the body, which I forgot to mention. John ended up getting possessed by him, ends up leaving the body, and then that's all we hear from him. So there's that. But let's go into the tidbits. I have a bit more about that. So Aunt Tracy calls Mary the nickname Cricket. We also have Mary's parents have been separated in the past, and Tracy knows about it, yet they always found their way back to each other, which is why Tracy believes the same thing will happen again. We also find out a little bit more about Latika. We found out that when her country was attacked when she was 13, her father went to war. He came back different, angry all the time, which led to then Latika trying to make herself smaller to hide from the violence, but always found her. And it eventually made her angry, and she acted on her anger for years until she hurt someone, which led her to choose the path of peace and wanting to be a pacifist. It also looks like Carlos has moved into the Campbell house from the looks of it. I mean, he was wearing Mary's robe at one point. And we find out that the Campbell family had a hunter-only phone line as well that was hidden. Also, Ada Monroe wasn't in the episode, Millie Winchester wasn't in the episode, and we got 2 voiceovers from Dean Winchester. Now, about supernatural parallels. So this is something I really like, because it's always fun seeing what parts from the original show can be kind of mentioned or called upon in the parallel or in the prequel for this one. So for me in this episode, one thing that came to mind was only a powerful ghost could possess humans like a demon could, was the question I had, because I couldn't remember it. Definitely the white misting between the bodies was something different. Then I remember that John Winchester did get possessed by a ghost. Or no, that this young John getting possessed by a ghost in this episode reminded me of when 2 instances on Supernatural. Sam was possessed, or he was more influenced by the spirit of Dr. Ellicott in episode 110 of Supernatural. And then we also got adult John getting possessed by the yellow white demon, but of course that's a demon in the episode 122 on Supernatural. We also then, I guess a third example was Bobby being a ghost, and then he was able to possess people because he was angry enough about how he died. So that's always something there as well. So those few possession moments came to mind quickly for me, but it did look slightly different when young John here got possessed by Mac. So that's something there. Also realizing as I'm talking and going over my notes right now, I might be missing a lot of things, but these are the things that like I could easily sum up while keeping this video short. I do highly recommend that you go see the video, or not video, go see the episode completely to actually get the full experience of what is being talked about in the experience and actually go through the journey with it. But moving on to episode 107. So, timeline wise, this takes place shortly after episodes 106 because they quickly moved to the location of where the radio tower is that they got the location of at the very end of the previous episode. So, maybe shortly after is enough time for them to travel from the clubhouse to the actual location, is probably the case. So, there's that. First scene of the episode shows John and Mary at the abandoned radio tower and finding Samuel Campbell's bloody bag. So we're now a lot more closer to the hunt of Mary's father, which is exciting. Now, moving into storylines, we do have how many? We do have 3 storylines. First one, what is in the box, which apparently is a sternum. Names up on screen. Second, where's the queen? And third, what is behind the door? Which is kind of connected, but anyways. So the first storyline, we have Ada Monroe returning with the Amena Letters research that was all in Henry's writing. We find out that she was trying to help her son Tony readjust and try to get off the grid from the Akrita, which led them to finding more research about the Amena Letters. But anyways, it leads them to wanting to do a seance for Henry Winchester because it was in his handwriting and they needed a quick way to find out how to work this monster trap box. Turns out it's actually a teleporter to send the monster back to where they came from, using an energy source to dictate where they got teleported. So the box wasn't actually broken, it just needed to be recharged. And they needed a rock from the Akrita's home universe, which ended up being a rock I think was hidden among the jasmine vine that Henry had planted at the garage, or it was growing there. I'm not quite sure. But that's something there. We also find out the Akrita Queen needs to be stopped to sever the connection to the other Akrita workers, like a hive. So that's new information we got. The second storyline of where the queen is, we see Rock and Roxy giving Mary a deal to trade the box for Samuel's life, because she ended up finding out when giving a message that that's who they had captured, how he was important to our hunters. So the hunters race to get this Osternum box to work and to find the location of the Krita before their scheduled trade meeting. We have John and Mary fighting the Krita before using the box on Roxy, but they still get ambushed, which ultimately leads Samuel using the box to pull a few more Akrita bodies through the teleporter. So that's something there. So we actually have Samuel back, which leads to storyline number 3, which being what is behind the door. So while all this is happening, we see a bunch of Akrita workers who are possessing human hosts digging through this tunnel system in order to find this ancient-looking door. And the last scene of the episode shows one of these Akrita workers taking the monster essence files that they've collected to this ancient door, and behind that door is where we're assuming is where the queen has been hiding this whole time. We definitely don't see anything. We do see the worker kind of offer up the essence to someone who definitely acts more of a higher status than this worker. So that is something there. Death tally, though, would be Hector's body, which was the Akrita messenger that John and Mary found at the tower in the car trunk. And then I believe it's Rock and Roxy's body, just because they managed to suck the Akrita possessing her out of it into the monster box. But very quick spoiler, Rock and Roxy, her body is alive and walking around in episode 110, which we'll talk about later at the very end when we talk about the promo. So she's not technically dead, but by this episode we think she is. So I'll leave her there. But let's talk about tidbits. I got a few more here. So we know that John used to play baseball, which Henry missed quite a lot about. So that's something that's still the same in Supernatural. We know that Carlos used to blame himself for his parents getting killed by ghouls, since they were supposed to be getting a new guitar for him when they were attacked by the ghouls. Carlos ended up killing all but 2 ghouls who had killed his parents. So I have a feeling we're going to see those ghouls return at some point. And then we have Ada Monroe's absence in the previous episode being explained in this episode about her, like I mentioned before, helping Tony get off the radar of the Akrita, which led to them searching for more Jinn research to help him with his abilities, which led them to the meta letters research. So that's something. Okay, supernatural parallels here. Major one. When we found out about the Akrita's connection to the queen and how you have to destroy the queen to destroy the hive members, this is very similar to Supernatural's Leviathans, mainly because the whole thing was about them trying to take down Dick Roman, who was the leader of the Leviathans. Because once they did that, then the whole I guess organization of the Leviathans would crumble. I mean, we never really fought. They weren't really much of a bigger threat after Dick Roman was eliminated, right? So it's kind of the same premise. You can kind of say it's vaguely similar to the mother of monsters, which is Eve. When she was connected to all of her babies, which were the alphas of each species of monsters. And then when she died, the connection kind of crumbled. Or then when the alphas died, their connection to like the rest of their creaturelings also got affected, I believe. So got a bit of a monster connection there. Another parallel though, is Henry's music box to John. When Henry Winchester was first introduced, we know that he had given John a music box right before he disappeared, and then he mentioned that same music box to Sam and Dean, and the song that used to play on it, which is the same song that was mentioned in this episode as being very important for Henry and Millie. So that is something there. So then at this point, we're now having the winter break holiday, gone on break for I think over a month, and now we're back with episode 108, which premiered on Dean Winchester's birthday. As always, happy birthday. Anyways, timeline though for the episode for 108 is that it's the day after episode 107 because Samuel is still healing from being a hostage of the Akrita. Samuel also says it's been a few months since he last saw Carlos and Latika, since they've changed quite a bit since then, but we don't know really how long we don't know how long Samuel has been missing. We just know that by the time we met Mary in episode 101, Samuel was missing, but we don't know if like he just suddenly, or if it's been weeks or months or anything like that, or even how long or when the last time he saw Carlos or Tika before. Like, was it months before he went missing that they last saw him? He made it seem like they changed quite a bit, which is interesting. First scene of the episode shows us in Kansas City, Missouri. We see Brock being burned alive in an alleyway behind a bar called Knave of Hearts Bar. And then someone with a fancy hat clapping over his burning body, which you definitely know is the guy who did it. So, storylines though. Picked up on 2 specific ones. First one, musical burnout. Second, Akrita Queen's whereabouts. So, first storyline has Carlos and Latika investigating the burnt musician, only to run into Carlos's old bandmate Jericho, who happened to make a deal with Loki. Loki returns. And we have Carlos being tricked into taking Jericho's spot and performing as Rivers Gemini again, but instead of targeting Jericho, Carlos is willing to sacrifice himself so no one else dies because of his singing, which then leads to Loki's plan backfiring and him being forced back into his power mirror as his prison. So Loki got defeated by his own game. So woohoo! We'll talk about Loki later though. Second storyline though, as this happens, is the Akrita. So after Samuel heals, he reveals that he was looking for the Queen's burial site when he was captured, as the Queen is crucial to their plan of taking over Earth. He took recon photos that didn't reveal much on location due to the light exposure of the film. But he ends up needing to leave again to meet up with Ada to find more weapons against the Akrita. He also leaves behind ingredients to a spell for an anti-possession tattoo against the Akrita. It's a lot smaller than the flaming pentagram tattoo, but it's something he got on his chest, and it's something he told Mary to get for herself so that she's protected. So at least Samuel's clear, and we know he's not possessed, which is something I kind of feared ever since we got introduced to the idea of him being taken by the Akrita. So that is something there. The last scene of the episode shows Mary after Mary confesses to John that she wants to be with him. John is distracted, so before they have their first kiss, John is distracted by Samuel's photo that he left behind of a man in the background who John recognizes as the man who gave him Henry's letter in the pilot episode. And it just so happens to be that that man is Dean Winchester himself with the Impala. Best surprise ever on Dean Winchester's birthday. You know, that I'm just saying. So death tally in this episode, we have Brock the musician in the teaser, as well as the bartender. He also got burned as well too, unfortunately. So there's those two there. Tidbit wise though, Ada is away again looking for a lead to more weapons since the box was destroyed after Samuel used it to suck in all the Creta that were attacking Mary and John. We have John bringing up the kiss to Mary, who admits, because they did kiss when they thought they were going to die from the Creta. So the last scene, he interrupted what would have been their second kiss. But anyways, John brings up the kiss to Mary, who admits that she's not sure or ready on the next step. Eventually, she changes her mind, which you saw in the last scene of the episode, and admits that she wants to be with him. We find out that Loki is left-handed while Mary is right-handed, which is the reason why Samuel was able to tell that Mary wasn't actually Mary during the fight and why he stabbed her, because he knew it wasn't his daughter. So that's something. And we have Millie wants to try to fix the box as if it were a broken car. So she wants to contribute in that sense. And then the parallels for Supernatural. So, first off, we have the music tattoo that Loki put on Jericho and how it got transferred to Carlos when the deal got moved over. That deadly tattoo transfer idea reminds me of the first Mark, when Kane transferred it to Dean, allowing him to use the first blade. So that was a huge reminder there. We also have the Trickster making duplicates of himself from episode 215 of Supernatural and using those to fight the hunters. We saw that in this episode as well. We have the anti-possession tattoos being shown. Not only do we see the flaming pentagram in a few of the texts that they go through the research, but the idea of an anti-possession tattoo returns, but this time it's for the Creta instead of against demons. We also see Samuel Campbell stating his regret of teaching Mary to be a hunter, like he was forced to be a hunter from his own father, as it parallels adult John Winchester's own regret, I believe, because he said he never wanted Sam and Dean to, he didn't want it to be long-term for the boys. He thought it would be a quick mission, and then they can go on with their lives, but it ended up being a mission that took 20 years to kill the demon that killed Mary. It's also something that, I don't know if you count this, but when the boys would meet Mary, or when she came back later on, she never wanted her boys to become hunters, so that's something of interesting there if you'd want to count that as a parallel or not. But it's definitely a parent not wanting their child to be a hunter. We'll go over that. And then finally, the episode I just finished watching tonight, episode 109. Let's talk about that one. So the timeline, not much, but I think it's shortly after the events of 108. I don't know how long, though, in between, but it's definitely long enough that John and Mary are able to keep their relationship a secret. So maybe it's a day later. Maybe they can't keep it to themselves for so long. Or maybe not, because I got the impression that he was like, we keep sneaking around. So maybe it's more than just a day later. But anyways, first scene of the episode was in Lawrence, Kansas, when we see an armored truck being attacked by vampires in search of this amulet that used to belong to the Men of Letters that was being transferred as it was restored from a bank, and it was being transferred to another bank branch. So there's that. But the storylines, we have two different storylines. One, Fate with a Vampire, and two, relationship changes. So first one with Fate with a Vampire, we have that when searching for the vampires that were trying to rob the Men of Letters of a special amulet, John touches that amulet when they find it in the clubhouse, and he sees his future, which includes that vampire leader attacking him and what looks like killing him. ultimately, in the end, John ends up getting electrocuted so he can buy Millie time to escape the vampire since they were trapped from with him, and then buying time for Mary to kill that vampire, um, in hopes of using his death or his temporary death as a weapon against the vampire, who's only focused on chomping down on him. So again, I cut that down really briefly, so go watch that one, but it's kind of pretty cool. But the relationship changes we experience in this episode. First off, we got John and Mary keeping their relationship a secret to avoid any changes with the work dynamic with the others, but Millie already knows, and Carlos and Latika suspect it. But everyone is on the same page about their relationship by the end of the episode. We also have Carlos. We find out that Carlos had his first date with Anton, who we met in episode 106, yet Carlos didn't call him back. So when Anton had to be called in to stitch up Carlos's wound on his leg, Carlos then apologizes for not calling him back, but then asks him out for a second date. Anton kisses him, and I believe he says that he'll have to check his schedule, which Carlos admits it's what he deserves. But they seem to be on good terms, and hopefully we actually see their date in the future, because we did not see their first one. So there's that. And then, of course, we have Betty, cop Betty, returning, and she grows more suspicious of Mary as she keeps finding her at crime scenes, which leads to her being worried that John is getting back into his old habits of using aggression. Which leads into, though, the last scene of the episode where Kyle, the reporter, meets up with Betty, the cop, and she confirms his suspicions about Mary not being in part of the good crowd. And we see Kyle having files on Mary, Carlos, and Latika. I couldn't see if he had one on John as well, but we also see that Kyle has the Akrita neck mark, so he is currently being possessed by an Akrita. And this is the only scene mentioned or referred to in this episode of any connection to the Akrita. So that's something there. Death tally, though, we got a lot of dead bodies in this episode, like actually on scene. So first we got Pete, which was one of the armored truck drivers. We got Diana, who is that specialist about the amulet being killed by the vampires. We get 5 vampires being killed by Mary. We get 2 being killed by Carlos, and then we got that one being a vampire leader who kind of killed John and then got killed by Mary by beheading them. So that is something that I'm pretty sure that is the biggest death tally we have so far in the series. So, anyways, tidbits. In this episode, we have Dean's voiceover being all about his dad telling him that fate is what you make it, but it is also, we find out, the same thing that Millie tells a young John. So Millie told John, who then told Dean. So that's a good thing. And it's true. Fate is what you make it. And in the whole episode, John is trying to figure out, like, is this fate sealed with what the amulet showed him, or can he make a change to it? And ultimately, he makes a change. He did his own interpretation. He got out from that vision of death. So that's something there. Also, that's another thing. We'll talk about that in a moment when I do parallels. But next thing, John and Mary still have no idea who the man in the photo is that gave John the letter from the amulet. Of course, we know that's Dean Winchester. Though Mary did call him cute, which I guess is kind of full circle because Dean kind of did the same thing when he time traveled back in time to see a young Mary. And I think he called her hot or he called her a babe, but then he realized that he's going to hell. So it's worse for him because he knows who she is, but Mary does not know who Dean is in the photo. So that's kind of a funny full moment there. We actually don't see Ada Moreau in this episode. I think we're meant to believe that she's off trying to find the weapons that Samuel referred to in the last episode. So maybe that's what's happening. We do see Latika uncovering a whole tunnel system at the clubhouse, including a vault room that stores the magic fate amulet in the end by the metal letters. But it seems to be locker rooms and other rooms that we hopefully will get to see more of. But it's definitely a little dusty down there. And then this just might be me, but I'm pretty sure John and Mary both got haircuts because they definitely looked different in comparison to the previous episode, which I only just watched a couple days ago. So, yeah. I don't know. It just stuck with me. I was like, they look different. I can't put my finger on it. I'm pretty sure John had a haircut. And then Mary, I think she had a haircut, but she definitely had a new choker on or a new necklace. I think she had a different way of putting her hair. Something was different. But that's my take. Okay, so supernatural parallels. So the one that I just remembered right now is John having a vision about him dying by vampires. That's a parallel to Supernatural, where Sam also got a vision about huge spoiler here. Sam got a vision about him and Dean being turned into vampires, and that was going to be the end of their fate when he was facing off against God. And then ultimately, Dean ended up dying to vampires. I mean, not directly, but it was during a vampire fight, you know? So vampires have, like, there's some kind of. I think all Winchesters should just stay away from vampires. I mean, Dean ended up being turned into a vampire briefly, so it's like them and vampires do not mix very well at all in any sense of the term. It's not just a clean cut case with them, so that's a parallel there. Also, vampires don't have retractable teeth in the Winchesters like they do on Supernatural, and apparently holy water burns them in this version when holy water does nothing on Supernatural. The thing is, though, I can't tell if that's just a whole vampire species type of difference in Supernatural, or in the Winchesters, or if it's because in the Winchesters these vampires were specifically from a group that worshipped this cult that created the amulet. So I don't know if it's like they have special skills because they're that part of that group, or if it's like that's what vampires look like in the Winchesters as a whole. So I'm not quite sure, but there is a difference between them. Like, I know that. But I don't know why there's a difference. So that's one right there. Another one is John getting electrocuted. Reminded me of when Dean got electrocuted in episode 112. Of course, Dean ended up getting huge heart problems from that. So I'm a little worried that John might be experiencing something like that, unless the shocks between them, like, unless like Dean got definitely a high voltage shock when he was electrocuted versus what Millie implemented on John to just temporarily stop his heart to make it so that his blood was dead man's blood to weaken the vampire, you know. But again, both of them getting electrocuted, not a pretty sight. No ways. I still remember being freaked out when Dean got electrocuted in 112 very early on in the season, and not knowing what the show would do without Dean, kind of a thing. When, like, we don't even know if there's a season 2 at that time. That was some stressful times right there. But alright. Okay, now that I've talked about, I tried summarizing. I hope I did alright. But again, go watch the episodes yourselves, because all the details there. Let's talk about the next segment stuff. So, most shocking moment of the episodes. So, for episode 106, most shocking moment for me has to be that this case was not really connected to the Akrita's unique monster theory. I thought it was with the Suyakent, but it turned out just being a vengeful spirit. So that was a shock for me there. In episode 7, most shocking moment was that it was the mid-season finale where we got both Samuel Campbell being found and Rock and Roxy being eliminated, which was just shocking for me as a mid-season finale. I mean, this is episode 7 out of 13. We're like really like halfway there, which we'll talk about why it's shocking later at the very near my prediction section. We'll talk about that there. Okay, episode 8, most shocking moment, the fact that we've got both Loki and Dean Winchester implanted into the Winchesters show is just crazy. I mean, Richard Space Jr., who plays Loki, was back for episode 7 to direct it, so I thought, if anything, any of his characters would be in that episode. So it was a huge surprise that the following episode was when his character appeared. But I guess it would make sense because he's already in town, right? So, like, why not utilize that? So that was a huge welcome surprise there. And of course, episode 9, I'd have to say the shocking thing was that we had reporter Kyle meeting cop Betty. I was not expecting that at all. I wasn't, like, completely threw me off. And then until we finding out that he was actually an Akrita host, it's like, oh, that's why he's trying to turn Betty against them and trying to get them on their tail, because he wants them distracted. Which also reminds me, if I really think about it, when the Leviathans did that to Sam and Dean, they tried to get law enforcement to turn on them so that they really had to go into hiding and really be off the grid, you know? So there's that. But top favorite moments, episode 6. First one was the detail behind the Hunter's funeral pyre. Really love we got to. It wasn't just them putting the body in the fire and lighting it up. They actually went through a whole ritual of cleaning the body, how to tie her up properly, how to place her on the pyre, how to put the how to send her off properly, what was needed. Um, I really like that because we never got that in Supernatural. It was always just it seemed more personal when they did it here and more meaningful. Like there was a ritual behind it for them, and it seemed like all hunters knew it. So I really appreciated that. Another favorite I did have was just between John and Latika, specifically how he went to her at the very end asking how she found peace and how she works through that uh, angry part of her, and that's where she decides to teach him how to meditate. Um, it was also very interesting to see her come through that journey of wondering if she was a liability as a hunter, and yet her being a pacifist is what allowed them to prevail in their fight against the vengeful spirit Mac. So I really like that. But it was great to see them having a bonding moment. Ultimately, is what I liked. Another favorite I did like was John and Mary. Specifically, I wrote that I really liked the apology. Um, that because of course John was possessed in this episode and he was fighting like Mary, but before that they fought because she confronted him about his aggressive behavior. But I really like that John was able to apologize to Mary about that fight. I mean, Mary definitely didn't blame him for when he was possessed and he had to fight her, but like the fact that he acknowledged that he was in the wrong and that he brought that up. I'm actually really liking this John because he seems to have a lot more awareness in the sense of he's bringing up a lot of conversations to Mary, which I would assume he would kind of avoid or like put him on the back burner and like wait until she brings them up. But I like that he wants to bring them up just so that he is on the same page about something, which I really appreciate and I really like that awareness from him. So that's something there. And then, of course, I really like the dynamic between Carlos, Latika, and Anton in this episode. It's just really interesting to have that friendship between Latika and Anton, but then also seeing Carlos kind of freaking out because he's having a crush on Anton and being like not knowing how to like talk or behave around him, and Latika's like really witnessing this and like, what is wrong with you? And I thought that was hilarious. So that's something there. Now, my favorite moments for episode 7, the next episode, first off, Henry Winchester's reunion with John. Just getting Henry back was just amazing, but it was really, really impactful and emotional to see that reunion get with John. And I'm really like he briefly got one with Millie before he had to disappear, but it was definitely more important for John to have that moment with Henry. And to know that his father is proud of him and that he is enough. So I really appreciate that. Another favorite, of course, is John and Mary. Specifically, the confession. Again, I really like that John brought up the kiss first that they had in the warehouse and how he was saying that, nope, wrong day. That's the next episode. Anyways, confession wise, all I wrote was confession and kiss, so I definitely appreciate the kiss that they had. And then confession. I don't know. Maybe it's all blurring together for me, but I remember briefly that there was a confession. Um, Hold on. Let me check. Putting a pause on this. I found it. It was the confession that John had to Mary about him thinking he wasn't enough for Henry and that he blamed himself for why Henry was leaving. It was right before Henry showed up. So that confession, because it was very heartfelt, it was truthful, and him being vulnerable like that is what led to Henry being able to show his spirit. But I really appreciate that John was able to be that vulnerable with Mary. Um, and of course, the kiss that they have. Yeah, of course, it was a kiss when they think that they're gonna die. And it's like kind of like I wanted to, if I could do one thing before I die, it's like it'd be this. So I do appreciate that. And then, of course, I really like the friendship that we see with Millie and Ada. We see them briefly bond in the greenhouse. They're drinking over some wine. They're talking about kind of like comparing like old memories with Henry. And then I really like the fact when Millie asks Ada like how does she deal with it when it comes to the hunters. She says that I let them think they're in charge and just drink wine. Like she's aware that like she is the adult out of all of them, like the older one out of the hunters, and yet she lets them take the wheel. So it's kind of funny having them talk about that. But episode 8, so the one favorite that I was mistaking as number 7 was uh, John bringing up the kiss to Mary, and how he was saying how like he didn't just kiss her because he thought they were gonna die and he didn't have to deal with the consequences afterwards. But he brought up that he wants the consequences. Like if it was a mistake, he wants to deal with it. If it was something they could move forward with, that he wants to deal with that as well too. So I really appreciate that he brought that up to her, and that she was truthful in the fact that she doesn't know what she wants. She's not sure if she's ready for a relationship or if she wants a relationship given the situation, as her focus is more on making sure her father was okay. So I really appreciate that they had that honest conversation. So I'm really loving that. Another favorite I did like was that uh, Carlos as a whole, because he was able to shine, he was able to sing, but also him acknowledging that the hunters were his family, and that because it was a big question of like saying like he gave up music, he gave going up on tour to go to hunting. What did you gain out of that? It seemed like he sacrificed a lot for it, and then Carlos admits that he didn't actually sacrifice a lot because he gained so much more from hunting, and that was the family that he found. So I really appreciate that sentiment a lot from him. And then of course, um, I really like the moment between Samuel and Mary. Of course, it starts off as a fight, but ultimately, uh, Samuel reveals his motivation to Mary as he why he left without her to face off the Akrita, because he thought his leads that led him to the Akrita were a way to eliminate all monsters. And he wanted that for her. He wanted to find a way to stop all the creatures or destroy all the creatures so that Mary could leave hunting and not ever be brought back into the hunting life. So I really appreciate that conversation with him. Of course, yeah, he should have told her why you were leaving so that she wouldn't have to follow you in hunting. But like, I really appreciate that he got to be that truthful with her. Kind of funny when he also called her a stubborn asshole and acknowledging that he's also one too. So that's kind of funny there. That's actually what was it? That's actually another parallel now that I think about it, because Samuel thought that this lead would lead to uh, the be all solution to end all creatures, which is kind of similar to the tablets on Supernatural when they had the demon tablet, the angel tablet, the Leviathan tablet. The Leviathan tablet definitely helped them cut the head off the snake essentially, but the demon tablet, they were under the belief that if they completed the trials, they'll close the gates to hell and reduce the number of demons on earth. Same way with the angel tablets. Use that, you can seal the gates to heaven and you won't have angels coming down. So, of course, hunters want to do that to kind of stop all that fighting, but yeah, very interesting there. And then finally, my favorites for episode 109. Of course, John and Mary, you definitely see them in full on couple mode, but then you also try to see them try to work in the fact that they are partners in the field. They work together. How do you manage the business part of it with the personal part? So it's very interesting. You definitely see a lot more kissing from them for sure. And I gotta say, I've the the height difference for me. It's just like, ugh, it's too cute. It's adorable. So that's something there. Another favorite I like was just John and Millie being able to research together and um, talk a little bit more about well Betty and then Mary and then everything, and then also to see the flashback of like John proposing that like yeah you gotta kill me, and then Mary or not Mary Millie just refusing to like I can't do it, and then ultimately her getting her son back. So I thought it was interesting to see the mother son dynamic for this episode for sure. And then final favorite I did have was Carlos being able to speak with Diego and having that full conversation. I think it was in Spanish, um, and having the subtitles for it. I really appreciate that it just didn't have them force him into having it in English. It just seemed more natural, more comfortable. with them speaking it in Spanish, so I do appreciate that. And then, of course, have to have Carlos's hair flip with the holy water. It was kind of funny having it like, oh, this is part of my routine. Latika dosed me with the holy water, and then it just him using it to his advantage, which is very Carlos. So I really like that. But let's move on to top peeve moments. So I didn't have any for episode 6, but for episode 7, it kind of annoyed me when Mary put down the bag that had the monster box inside of it just so that she can fight the humans that were being possessed by the Akrita. Here I'm thinking, why not just fight with the bag on your back? That way you know for sure that you have it and you can't misplace it, and you don't have to worry about an Akrita slipping past you to grab the bag and run. So that was a little, that was a thing that kept annoying me during the fight. And then in episode 108, a peeve that I had was the fact that uh, that okay, so Loki we know from Supernatural, but yet we found out there's 2 other ways to kill Loki in this episode, which were never mentioned on Supernatural before, and we've dealt with Loki so many times, or he's been mentioned so many times on Supernatural, so it kind of peeved me that like there wasn't that kind of consistency there, but I will talk about that later. And then of course a peeve that I did have in episode 109 was the fact that um, Mary took on 5 super strong vampires with only a machete. There was no additional preparation before she went into it. I know the scene was meant to show Mary being a badass, but if I think back on Supernatural when the Winchesters first took on vampires, they took on quite a few, and this is like 3 big guys. They needed machetes, they needed crossbows with arrow stakes to kind of slow them down, and I believe they also covered up their scent so that they can kind of do sneak attacks. They had a full, and they used dead man's blood too, so they had to use a full-on arsenal to get through the few vampires they had to get through. And yet you're telling me that someone who is like half their age and really half their size was able to take on these supercharged vampires with just a machete. It was very hard to believe. I was expecting baby. Why didn't she have dead man's blood? Why didn't she coat her blades with dead man's blood to at least weaken them? Why wasn't there stakes used to at least slow them down from like a farther distance? Just Mary and one machete did not make sense to me at all, which is why it's a peeve. But now let's move on to random questions for sure. As I'm looking at the clock, I'm almost coming up on an hour, so I really don't want to go over that. But random questions from episode 6. Did Mac's spirit move on? I'm assuming so. He definitely left John's body out of his own free will, but did he move on, or is he just floating to take on a new body? I have no idea. Next question. If John eventually remembered Letika's words to Mac about like finding peace from when he was possessed, does he then remember how Mac used his power to fight Mary and essentially used John's body to fight against Mary? Because it was never mentioned when he apologized to Mary about their fight, because it was a fight before he got possessed. So I'm wondering, did John remember that physical fight with Mary? And then overall, I'm going to ask this for every episode because I think it's important, but do I believe after this episode that this is set in the world of the supernatural, or is this an alternate version of John and Mary that we're seeing? I still think this is an alternate version of John and Mary, just because, yeah, just from that, I still think it's an alternate version. Um, there's more support as to why, but off of this episode, yeah, it's still alternate for me. Questions from episode 7. First one is, does the Akrita automatically take over the human host? Like, is there a chance for the human soul to survive after the Akrita leave the body, or is it a permanent transference thing? I'm wondering if it's more of like, is it an angel possession where like the human has to give consent, which is probably not. Is it more like a demon possession where they could still take over and the human is still trapped inside, or they eventually just die out because of the abuse of the body and the demon just remains in control? Like, what kind of happens here? Next question. Should I still be worried over the possibility of Samuel being possessed by the Akrita, similar to adult John being possessed by the Yellow-Eyed Demon? That was answered in episode 108 when Samuel showed that he had an anti-possession tattoo against the Akrita on him. So, safely to say, that question doesn't apply anymore. And of course, the continued question, do I believe that this is same timeline as Supernatural, or is it an alternate John and Mary? I think after this episode, it's definitely alternate John and Mary, mainly because when Henry returns as a spirit in 1972, it's kind of implying that he's dead in that timeline, whereas in the Supernatural timeline, we know that he disappeared in the 1950s and he time traveled forward to like 2013, 2014. So at the time of 1972, I don't think he would have been able to be called upon as a spirit because he wouldn't be a spirit in 1972. He never made it to 1972. He jumped forward to the 2000s. So I think that might be an indicator that we're dealing with an alternate John and Mary. We're definitely dealing with an alternate Henry, because I don't think the seance would have worked if we were in the regular Supernatural timeline or the original Supernatural timeline. So there's that. Random questions for episode 8. First one, why wouldn't the way to kill the trickster in Supernatural's episode 215 be used for this? In this, I believe they used a stake coated in something to kill him. But then, is it because in this episode they identified him as Loki specifically, whereas in 215 they only identified him as a regular trickster? I mean, according to the Super Wiki website, Richard Spade Jr. did reveal that it was Gabriel pretending to be Loki in this world. So that's an entirely different set of rules in general in itself. But I'll talk about that in a moment as well. But another question, why was the box destroyed after it was used last episode by Samuel to teleport all those Akrita that he was able to? Or did it burn up because he used up the last of the energy source that was in the teleporter? Or is there a limit to how many times you could use the teleporter before it's completely burnt up like it is? If there's a limit, that's kind of very limiting box, like limited weapon, So that's a question there. I'm wondering if Millie will be able to repair it, or if they have to find more of the energy source to be able to power it up again. Of course, the repeat of the question, is this different timeline or an alternate John and Mary? I think after today's episode, I'm really more confirmed that this is an alternate John and Mary, just because John's view about Samuel treating Mary as a soldier instead of as a daughter is very different to how John treats his own sons in the future, but then that also does match up with the John we met in 1978 when Sam and Dean time traveled back to meet the younger version of their parents. So, slightly there, but I'm definitely thinking it's a different version because of Loki being in prison. If it was actually Loki, how they imprison him is definitely different than what happened on Supernatural. But if it's actually Gabriel pretending to be Loki, then Gabriel being in prison is definitely different because he was not imprisoned on Supernatural. And I don't think, based off of what they told us about that mirror, I don't think anyone's breaking him out anytime soon. So I don't think he would have been able to be freed in order to meet up with the timeline that happened with Sam and Dean. So there's that. But my questions for episode 109. I'm almost done, I promise. First off, this is a question I had when Kyle first appeared, because my question was, why was reporter Kyle brought back for one scene to only run into John and Mary on their morning date? At first I thought that they were meant to actually meet up with him so that they can ask him to be putting his reporter skills to use to find the man in the photo, which is Dean. But no, I guess that kind of is a moot point because he does come back for a second scene, and it turns out he's Akrita trying to turn the hunters against Betty the cop. But I think I kind of like my use of Kyle better because I don't want him to be evil, and I prefer him helping them to find Dean so we can see Dean again, but instead of being the enemy. So, question there if anyone else was wondering that before we got him in the final scene. Another question, does anyone else hope that Betty can somehow become their version of Jody Mills in the sense that she could be an ally for the hunters while being in the police force instead of being someone that's trying to take them down and stop them from doing the things that she's not aware of that they are doing for her as a job? So there's that. I guess she was wanting to be protective of John. and she's worried about him, but at the same time, it's like, please don't impede on their hunt. You're just not being helpful, you know? And of course, the last time for today, I'm asking, is this an alternate version of John and Mary, or is this the same one from the Supernatural timeline? I am thinking it's an alternate version mainly because of the vampires. If these vampires are, all of them are with the sharp teeth and they can't be retractable, then definitely a different world of vampires. And if holy water works against all the vampires in the Winchesters, then definitely a different version of the vampires than what's on Supernatural. Because I don't recall holy water ever working. Crosses definitely don't work on them, but they were able to hide their fangs. Like, remember when Dean was a vampire, he was able to. He had a fight when the fangs wanted to pop out, but he still had his normal teeth. He could still pass as being human, as looking really sick. Um, so there's that. But let's move on to predictions very quickly. So for episode 10, I saw in the promo that we had the Akrita Queen having a photo of Dean and believing he's a hunter, so they want to eliminate him. Kyle is showing this photo to other Akrita hosts or human hosts. I don't know what they call them. So that's going to be something there. Hopefully, we'll see Dean soon. We also see Kyle cornering or confronting John, so maybe very quickly they find out that he's part of the Akrita team. We hear that human blood has to be spilled. I see women in different periods, specific clothing, so I don't know if it's like specific to the 70s or if it's further back and it's a flashback that we're going to get. Also see Latika speaking with the real Roxy about the Akrita Queen, and she remembers that she's underground, so at least we know that her spirit survived being taken over by an Akrita, so maybe there's hope for like someone like Kyle, maybe. And then lastly, we see the clubhouse being attacked once again. They really got to rebuild the wall the vampires blasted through and like fix up the wards, you know. So that's something. The synopsis, though, reads, while Carlos talks through a problem in his personal life, it gives Latika a new idea about how to find the Akrita Queen. Millie's new security system for the clubhouse proves helpful when Mary and John find an unexpected guest inside. Meanwhile, Latika's idea brings her and Carlos face to face with an unexpected ally. I'm thinking there, Latika and Carlos's unexpected ally has got to be Roxy. While the unexpected guest inside that John and Mary find, I'm really hoping it's Dean. I mean, that would be too quick for that to happen, but that'd be something, you know. Right? Wishful thinking. Okay. But as of now, apparently season 1 is going to get only 13 episodes. So at this point, there is only 4. Like, this was episode 9, so 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 4 episodes left of the season. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens there. Okay, I wanted to talk back on like why I thought it was shocking that the mid-season finale, which was episode 7, where they found Samuel already and they had like who we thought the queen was inside Roxy, having her being eliminated. Why I thought that was a surprise was because I was basing it off of how the first season of Supernatural was paced out. But again, that one had 22 episodes. So from that standpoint, again, their hiatuses were different. So we had the first 10 episodes before we had the winter break. Then we had episodes 11 to 16 before we had another break. In episode 16, it was when Sam and Dean actually reunited with their father again. Whereas in the Winchesters, it was episode 7 was when Mary reunited with her father. So like halfway through the season versus 3/4 of the way of the season for Supernatural. So that's why I was a little surprised, because for the first 16 episodes, it's always the smaller cases and hoping for a lead for their father. And then from 16 to episode 22, that's when they find out like the real reason why their father was running, the more about the yellow white demon and the conspiracy theory and all that, that they were going back on the main hunt that started it all, kind of thing. And that was the main focus to the end of the season. So I don't know. It was just maybe it's pacing of it. Maybe it's me being used to the very strict way that Supernatural season 1 was 17 years ago, and then trying to correlate that to a 13 episode timeline instead of a 22 episode timeline, because that is a 9 episode difference. So I'm just wondering, how else would we pace it out then? Because then would 3/4 of the way into the season, that's going to be what, 13? So maybe it is episode 10. Maybe the next episode would be the equivalent of episode 16. I don't know. It's definitely different because as I'm learning more about television writing, how you structure a season does depend on how many episodes you have or how many episodes you plan, because that you could stretch things out, you can really compact things in. So it's definitely something to definitely look forward to. But I'm very excited to see what the rest of the season has to hold. I'm hoping we get a season two. Um, I'm probably going to group my recaps again, just because it is based on the timing of when I can freely record. Because as I'm ending this recording right now, it's after 2 a.m. for me on technically a Sunday morning. Um, but hopefully we'll have a plan. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this long video. Thank you so much for your patience, for waiting this long to even get this video. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. You sticking around as I try to figure out what the fate of my channel is going to be. But I do hope you stick around for at least the remaining episodes of the Winchesters to see what I think by the end of the season. I hope you do come back for that. And I am looking forward to hear what you have to say about the 4 episodes. So you can leave your comment down below. I'd love to hear all about your own theories about what you hope to find coming up next. Also don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check my other videos if you haven't done so already. Um, you should also check out my Tumblr page. I really gotta update that too, but the link is down below as well. WordPress is a lot more cleaner for my Tumblr organization if you need to know. But otherwise, that is going to be pretty much it, guys. I can already feel it in my throat, and I'm probably going to really hate myself for it tomorrow. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your patience. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your week, wherever you are in the world, and I hope you stay safe and stay warm, because where I am, it is cold right now. So stay warm, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.